Welcome to the Prosthetics and Orthotics Podcast with Brent Wright and Joris. Hello everyone, my name is Joris, and this is another episode of the Orthotics and Prosthetics Podcast with Brent Wright. And welcome, Brent.
Hey Joris, I'm excited about today's podcast. It's gonna be a fun one. Okay. But man, all of them are fun, aren't they?
Yeah, for me. I don't know about the people listening, but for me,
I think we're doing okay.
Yeah, I think so. I get some good feedback and stuff, but I think I'm enjoying this. You're enjoying this, right?
Oh yeah.
Okay, then good. Then so I hope we find a third person or something. That would be good. Maybe we start today with our guest. And who is our guest today?
Hey, we've got Josh Ahlstrom here. He's an orthotist and a prosthetist for SureStep. But we'll probably spend maybe just a hair of time on that. But the reality is, what I think is the most interesting part of what he does is he's an orthotist and prosthetist for barn animals. So it is really neat to see some of the things that he comes up with for these animals. So we haven't had anybody that does animal prostheses and orthoses. And so this should be a fun one.
Cool. All right. So welcome to the show, Josh. How are you doing?
Doing very well. Thank you for having me.
And so I was just wondering, okay, so first off, how did you get into, we always start people off the same question. So how did you get into O&P in the first place?
Sure. I think I was kind of destined for the healthcare field. My dad was a high school science teacher, brother's a doctor, sister's an occupational therapist. So I knew I was going to do something kind of in the math and sciences and healthcare field. And then lo and behold, between my freshman and sophomore year of college, I was looking for a job doing basically anything in the healthcare field. And I came across a office in my little local hometown that was being managed by a gentleman named Joe Hunter. And Joe gave me a job being an assistant technician. So I basically was filling casts and modifying things and things like that in the back room. But was fortunate enough that quite quickly he started bringing me into patient rooms and kind of showing me the clinical side of things. And man, as soon as I still remember the day that we had a gentleman come in, transtibial amputee, coming in a wheelchair and walked out. And just seeing that sort of transformational process was, that was it for me. I was hooked. So, from there on, I basically got all my prereqs in order to transfer down to University of Texas, and that was that.
Okay. And then later on, now you're like a SureStep, right? So this is like, what does SureStep do exactly? Sure.
So we are really a premier manufacturer of pediatric and now even some adult orthotics and other sort of devices. So I always tell people, I mean, my job since 2004 has been helping kids walk. So and I've been really, really blessed and fortunate for that to be here in the U.S. and we have a reach globally as well. So it's really just been an incredible journey going from 2004 when we had about 10 people to now having over 200 people, and it's a 100% employee-owned company. Great culture, good people. It's just it's been pretty incredible to be a part of it.
Okay. And what's the difference between, aren't the devices the same and smaller? Is there why what's the difference between for children and for adults, like O&P stuff?
Sure. So I sometimes insurance companies will see it the same way, but I often tell people that, kids are not just small adults. So there's a lot of different things taking place with children that are kind of unique unto them. So not only do you have growth and everything like that continuing to happen, but all the bones aren't ossified. You have an opportunity to really make changes to their motor plans or how they actually walk and will operate kind of for the rest of their lives, which is unique. And then with kids, I think the other thing that happens is you'll see, virtually every diagnosis that you would with a lot of your adult placements, times about 1,000. So you get all these really interesting kind of rare disorders at times. But you just have an opportunity to work with them. It's all custom. for the most part, and in an environment where you can really impact their independence. And I think when you give a child more independence, their entire family gets more independence, which is just a really heartwarming thing to kind of be able to even be a part of. So it's working with kids is the best. It's awesome.
You did mention that there were some musculoskeletal differences. I mean, is it that you can learn to walk a different way easier, or is it that what does that mean?
So basically, the way that we, as we're developing, between the ages of about 0 and 6, you're going through all of these, just crazy amounts of changes as far as, growing taller, putting on more weight. Your bones are still forming and developing. So the bones will kind of shift and develop to the forces that are put on them. And then once they ossify, that is their shape. So with young children, you have an opportunity to actually impact even their bony development and set them up for good habits. So kids are very resilient and can figure out how to do things in a lot of different ways. But I think one of the greatest challenges that happens with kids versus what we sometimes see with adults is oftentimes when you're working with adult or geriatric patients, if something happens, or say, by chance they have a stroke, well, they have known how to walk or have walked a certain way for 30 or 40 years, maybe 50 or 60 years. So they kind of have a pre-wired way of how they want to walk, and then that's been taken away from them. So you have to try and work back to a good sort of gait pattern for them. With kids, when you're getting them very young, they don't have a pre-wired way of walking. They know they want to be upright, and they want to be able to get from point A to point B as fast as they can without falling down. So while we may not like the way it looks and understand that there's, potentially longer term consequences of that, for them, they're not worried about that. So it's, it's like modeling clay almost. I mean, you really have an opportunity to try and create the pathway, which is a little bit different than if you work with adults and geriatrics, where they've already created the pathway, typically for decades, and you're trying to get that back.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. And so then, how did you then end up doing prosthetics and things for animals? Well, how did that happen?
Yeah, it's a totally sideways turn there. So I live in Chelsea, Michigan, and there is a barn sanctuary here that does really incredible work. So they rescue farmed animals and provide them a home and take care of them. They've got a full-on staff care team, executive director, Dan McKernan, who actually started the barn sanctuary with his father Tom. They actually ended up having a show on television called Saved by the Barn. But he was in the IT sector, living down in Austin, Texas, making six figures and everything like that. And got a call from his dad and wanted to basically do something with this family farm that's been in their family for over 140 years. And Dan said, well, let's start a barn sanctuary. And his dad said, what is that? Fast forward, they started to take in animals and become successful in doing some of these things. But some of the animals they were taking in also had other anatomical deformities, or whether that be congenital, something they were born with, or something where maybe they got frostbite and literally ended up with an amputation because of that. But since we live in the same small town, Dan actually mentioned something to my wife one day about needing some adjustments, and she kind of laughed and said, well, my husband does that. So I went out there on a weekend and helped him out with some of their animals and things, and that kind of started the journey to where we are today, a few years later, and working with Brent and investing in some 3D printing software, and also using that as a conduit to really bring additive manufacturing into the fold.
And is this a charity thing, or is this like a commercial thing, or kind of a mix? Or
so they are primarily all the sanctuaries that I work with are nonprofit organizations. So they do raise their money through fundraising and those sort of things. I am not currently, as ARC Ortho, it's not a 501c3. I'd be interested in potentially doing that at some point, but we'll just have to see kind of how that works. This is very much kind of a side sort of passion project for me at this time. My full-time job keeps me pretty busy with work and travel as a senior director for SureStep.
Yeah, obviously. And what kind of things what are the challenges here? Because like I would imagine it would be completely custom every single time. Or
Yeah, absolutely. And that's honestly, that's kind of what drew me into it when I was exiting direct patient care, and a role was created for me to work with customers and consult and looked at different sort of business models and help people out within our field. I knew that there'd be basically a void of sort of that patient care aspect. And one of the things I loved about working with children is that pretty much everything was custom. If you have 100 children with the exact same diagnosis, no two of them are actually the same. So you're always trying to look for the best solution for that child, not just a solution. And this really poses a kind of a similar challenge with a whole bunch of other things of, you're working with different animals, different species, all sorts of different crazy things that can be thrown at you. Plus, I'm never going to work with a human patient that's 1,500 pounds. I may work with an animal patient that's 1,500 pounds. So you start to take a look at that, and then you think about additive manufacturing and things, and it becomes a really interesting sort of puzzle and challenge to put together, because we'll get faced with situations and circumstances that you never would working with humans.
And so what's a typical, is there such a thing as a typical thing, or is it all completely, you start from kind of first principles or from a blank slate of paper, or what?
Yeah, there's not really a typical that, and quite honestly, that's what I kind of love about it, and that's what I've enjoyed even working with Brent through a few projects as well, is that it usually starts with with an evaluation or a consultation, and either seeing the animal or getting pictures and videos, and just trying to kind of deconstruct the problem and apply known principles of sort of biomechanics and things like that to this kind of unknown or world. So yeah, there's not really a typical, but quite frankly, that's really what I love about it, is that there is no there is no average case.
Okay. So how do you get started then if there is no average case? Is there like okay, you go visit the animal, I guess, right? Or do you start with pictures, or how do you get started?
Yeah, so every case is pretty unique and different, but the process that I take is very similar to seeing a kiddo. So it'll usually start with some sort of a consultation. That may be an evaluation, that may be sharing pictures and videos or whatnot, and then just trying to develop an understanding of what the end goal is, and then working through the problem to figure out what a solution is going to be.
Okay. And so what do you start with CAD? Do you do a lot of work in CAD? What are some of the tools you use to get to a prosthetic?
So that was one of the interesting things about doing this, and part of the reason that I kind of started along this journey is, one, I certainly didn't want to lose any of the skills that I'd honed over the last 20 years of being able to create and develop different things, even hand skills, being able to do some of that kind of stuff. But it really did seem like a perfect opportunity also to expand into 3D printing, which is something that I've really been watching pretty close for the last probably 5+ years, and very interested in. And some of that's even just, I've been fortunate enough to be with an organization where we've always pushed innovation. We've always been kind of at the forefront of CAD CAM technology, in 3D printing. Well, not we've gotten into 3D printing here recently, but 7-axis carvers and all this kind of stuff. So it's something that I've been exposed to. But this was a perfect opportunity for me to really be able to learn more of that as well, and develop my own skill set for some of the ways in which you would modify in 3D printing software and be able to then create with an additive process as opposed to a subtractive process. Because I just feel like there are so many things that we haven't even exposed yet within the world of being able to help humans as well as help animals, that you can do with additive manufacturing that you just cannot do with traditional fabrication. So we can really design around some kind of age-old problems, and that's been really exciting. And that's where working with Brent too has just been a real blessing, because he's, well, as you know, I mean, he's the man when it comes to this stuff. So it's been awesome to have him as a colleague and a peer, and somebody to be able to talk with through things and lean on for different aspects of stuff. And he's so creative as well that it's been fun to kind of geek out on some of these things and go, okay, how could we make this?
Okay. And then and what kind of printers do you use? Do you end up using like a lot of different ones, or what do you end up doing?
We've used a fair number of different ones. I mean, we certainly use the multi-jet fusion printers. I'd say that's probably what we utilize the most, but we've done some different things with some FDM printers. I've got a little FDM printer at the house, even so that I could just try and get hands-on and learn some of the ins and outs of things. And Brent may be able to answer some of that question for you as well, because I like I said, I do lean on him at times for what's going to be our best avenue towards a successful outcome. Because just like when you're doing typical manufacturing, when you're doing additive manufacturing and 3D printing, material technology and science really helps to drive design at times.
Yeah. And then where does 3D printing, is it only the fact that it's easier to make low volume parts or make one-offs with 3D printing? Is that really one of the advantages, or what are some of the advantages using AM or 3D printing and this kind of thing?
I think that's an advantage. However, with a lot of what I do, everything's custom anyway. So, everything's a one-off part, which, so certainly lends itself to that. I like the aspects of what you can do, before and after. So even if I have to make a revision or something changes, I can go into that model, into that print, into that design, and then make alterations to that actual design. And it's captured digitally forever. So you sort of have that, which I see as a real advantage. But the other thing is just the ability to harness different shapes, different sort of profiles, different types of like lattice work and things like that. Things that you can't really do easily with plastic or laminations. So to be able to create that and then see it come to life, and then especially to see it work, those are the things that I see as being exciting. And then because you don't have standard components that have to attach, in a certain way, you can build really beautiful kind of one-piece things that are lightweight and dynamic, which again, from the standpoint of just being able to create solutions is exciting. It's really interesting, and quite frankly, I'm still learning. I feel like I was still learning with humans as well as continuing to learn with animals as well. I think the fact that my background is so much in pediatrics has made that transition easier, because there are a lot of similarities between animals, and I think specifically working with children, because if we're working with, say, like a goat or a sheep or something along those lines, then you have pretty small segments in bony anatomy, which you have to be careful of how you're going to manage that gait pattern. So that's similar to when we're working with kids. The other thing is that when you work with children a lot, you get to many of our kids are nonverbal, but if you just really pay attention to them and observe them, then they'll tell you everything you need to know. I mean, you can tell if they're enjoying it, not, things are working for them or not, that kind of stuff. And quite frankly, obviously the animals can't talk, but they're expressive as well. So you can actually, if you just kind of tune into that and really observe the way in which they move in different things, you can tell if it's hurting or if they're sort of biting at things, if they don't want it on, that kind of stuff. From a biomechanical standpoint, it is a different world, and I've been fortunate to work with some pretty impressive vets through some of the different university hospitals, and they've been great about answering questions that I have, or even me finding videos or them finding videos of what like a normal gait is for a horse and what a normal gait is for different types of animals, so that then you can take a look at that biomechanically and say, okay, this is normal gait. This is what we're dealing with. How do we try and give, this animal a prosthetic solution or an orthotic solution that would give it a chance to then practice that normal gait? So it's almost like when we're, training amputees, even as adults or geriatrics, where, that gait training part is really critical. We want them to take, small good steps rather than big bad steps, and develop good habits early, so that as they do that more and more, that motor plan and those muscle strategies start to become ingrained to where now it's just the way they can walk sort of unconsciously. And so we do that same thing with the animals. We implore them when they start to, we start slow. We have them do a lot of just weight shifting. We try and make sure that we're not developing big changes, with a whole bunch of circumduction and kind of using their joints. The other thing with animals that I've found is that so many of them, when we start working with them, they're really weak and atrophied because they haven't necessarily used that joint segment all that much. So you have that where you're playing into changes down the road as well. So to be able to get back to some of the 3D printing stuff, it gives us an opportunity, if we can be creative in the way that we put these solutions together, we can think forward into the adjustments that'll need to be made or possibly need to be made down the road, which keeps you from having to, potentially just make new items all the time, which can be expensive.
Okay, and in that kind of scenario, I mean, what are the budgets have to be tiny here as well? Do you have to be very economical because everything is kind of like a charity thing? Do you have to think in a very different way than with humans because like the numbers are different, or?
You do. I mean, so yeah, I mean, you're certainly not going to get paid for, an animal prosthesis like you would for a human prosthesis, and it's not, insurance footing the bill on these things. So yeah, that challenge of efficiency definitely plays a part as well. And again, every single case is unique. So the costs do bounce around a little bit, just based on what you're making, which is that, is similar. Because if you're making a transfemoral prosthesis versus making a partial foot prosthesis, obviously the amount of time, effort, fabrication, materials, all of those things are significantly different usually between those two levels. So the transfemoral is going to therefore cost quite a bit more than what a partial foot would. So you do have some variation in cost too, depending on the complexity of the case, just as we would in orthotics or prosthetics.
Okay. And I was just wondering, you're dealing with stuff like feathers and fur and stuff. Is that an extra problem, or is that actually, does it help, or is it problematic? Or
Well, I've seen it. I've seen it kind of work both ways. Sometimes that is a way to give you a little bit more cushioning or padding to the area, which is great because it's, that fur or those feathers are typically designed to be some sort of a protective feature to the underlying skin. However, on the other side of that, if you think about being able to get a prosthesis or an orthotic to suspend properly and not want to rotate, having that extra layer in between the skin interface can lend to some difficulty with keeping rotation out of there or making it hold on really well. So it is a fine balance of trying to find, again, that sort of right solution that's going to work properly, but not cause any adverse effects either, with blisters or bruises or a lot of the same things that we may worry about with humans.
yeah, and I've also seen like there's a dog like kind of in my neighborhood that has like wheels instead of like a kind of a prosthetic leg or something. They literally put like a little carriage under the dog with wheels. Is things like that? Is that a good idea, or is that does that work? Or because it seems remarkably cost effective. I just think it's really strange.
Yeah, so they make they make carts for obviously for dogs and different size animals and things like that, and the carts can be really, really effective for some animals. So I think that's, one of the things that I do through Arc Ortho is I never try and sell anybody on anything, honestly. Like I want to be a lifelong learner, and we're always going to have, cases and situations that are potentially challenging. My goal is really just to try and be a resource and a creative thinker, for individuals. And I've had animals where we've chosen to not make anything because a cart really is a much more appropriate and like you said, cost-effective solution. And ultimately it's going to be what probably works best for that individual to achieve a good quality of life and some independence. So we really approach it the same way.
Okay. And you mentioned, so you what kind of animals have you worked with? I mean, like dogs and stuff, or the obvious one, little sheep and stuff like that. What are the kind of animals you've worked with so far?
So I have worked with a few dogs, but I really do try and focus more on the farmed animals sort of category. So I don't do as much with dogs and cats. I actually have my college roommate. You asked before kind of how I got into this. Working with animals has always been, I guess, kind of in my head because my college roommate, Ben Blakey, who lives out in Nebraska, has a company. He's a CPO, but also has a company called Go Hero Go, where he makes really great devices for dogs and has been doing that for, I think like 12, 15 years now. So quite honestly, if I have dogs, I will usually send them Ben's way as I appreciate him as a subject matter expert on that. And I also appreciate his friendship. So like that kind of stuff, a lot of times I'll get him involved. And then, but from the farm animal standpoint, I mean, I've worked with ducks, goats, sheep, cows, horses, pigs. I've worked with a lot of different types of species at this point. And then, the crazy thing about that is, when you get into a category that way, if you want to sort of do it that way, if you say goats, the number of different types of goats and how big they're going to be and weigh and all that kind of stuff, it changes drastically. So it's almost like if you say a dog, well, that just puts you into a category. And then, you could have anything from a Great Dane to a Chihuahua. So within all of these different categories, there are lots of different variations in size and things that you have to be concerned about.
Okay. And what's the biggest animal you did? Because I think it's just, if you have something huge, then it would also be challenging, right?
Yeah. So I think the biggest, well, it'd be a cow, and I'm trying to think of how much the biggest one weighed. I want to say like 1,300 pounds.
I'm not really big on cow weights in pounds.
Well, no, I'm saying the largest. I've worked with quite a few cows, but I'm saying I think the largest one that I've worked with was around 1,300 pounds.
Wow. And then what did you have to do? What was the prosthetic then?
That was a cow that actually, I believe, ended up. It was a rescue case, and it had gotten frostbite, and essentially lost its hoof. So they did the frostbite basically took the hoof for the most part, and then the veterinary hospital, university hospital, came back in. And I had an opportunity to talk with the vets a little bit, and they did more or less a revision surgery so that we could have a weight-bearing surface, much like you would think of a Symes amputee, a weight-bearing surface that could truly tolerate weight, and then with some soft tissue coverage for it. And then we were building essentially built like a bivalve prosthesis underneath it to make up the difference in height and make sure that we had some protection so that it didn't in the future kind of destroy that surgical site. And
wouldn't that weight be enormous then on that prosthetic? Or
yes, it would. It certainly would. But I mean, knock on wood. To this point, it's he's done very, very well. So hopefully that continues to be the case. And in that case, it's similar to what we would think of otherwise in prosthetics. I mean, Brent alluded to it a little bit before, but sometimes you get into working with things where you're working to carry the weight through bones that weren't normally designed to be weight bearing or weight bearing in that way. So again, it really is about total contact and even pressure distribution and trying to carry that enormous amount of weight and force through a larger surface area so that you can limit discomfort, problems, breakage, all of that kind of stuff.
Okay. And so we I also work at 3print.com, and I work at SmartTech, and at 3print.com, we know that some of our most popular stories are animal prosthetics, right? There's a lot of interest in here generally by people. There's also, I notice a lot of companies really want to help, like material companies and OEMs. Everybody likes being a part of these stories. Is there a way we could improve this to, channel this kind of enthusiasm to make it so that more animals can get these prosthetic devices? Or
yeah, I think possibly. I think there's kind of a double-edged sword in there too. Because everybody, like when folks see that, and I did the same thing, like you see this and you go, oh, that'd be cool. That'd be really neat. And you say, I want to get involved in doing some of that. I think just like patient care, or any type of patient care, it's important that if you're going to get involved, that you're going to stay with that individual through the end. So it's not just about making something that looks cool. It's also about, well, that's going to need adjustments. It's going to need things replaced. It's going to need, straps, pads, this, that, whatever. I mean, all the things that you would imagine happening when you're working with humans. Well, quadruple that easily when you're dealing with animals, because you're talking about, they're out in the barnyard and the pasture and the this and the that, and and anything that you could imagine happening to it will, and then you have to be a resource to continue to help them out, and make sure that you kind of just it's a continuum of care basically. So I would love to see some more energy and effort kind of put into some of this. But it's, like I said, it's a really delicate balance of making sure that if you're going to do it, you're really going to do it all the way. Because, I've unfortunately on the other side, I've heard of and seen a few cases where things were made, and people kind of walked away from it And then that doesn't help ultimately that individual animal or that sanctuary or the caregivers or the people or any of those things. So I guess it's like anything else. If you're going to start, be willing to finish.
Okay. All right. I think that's really good advice, generally, but also specifically with this, it would seem very valuable. So, Josh, I'm very fascinated by the work you do. I think it's really wonderful that you're doing this, and it would seem to be an absolutely amazing challenge as well to be doing day to day. So, thank you so much for telling us about this today.
Yeah, absolutely, my pleasure. And I'd all the best to you guys. I appreciate you having me on.
Okay, and Brent, thanks for being here again today.
Oh, this is fun, and I always get a chuckle when Josh sends me files. He's like, "Hey, I've got a new pig that I want to do a prosthesis for," and I'm like, "Oh, that's great." And I'm like, how much does the pig weigh? He's like 400 pounds. I'm like, oh wow, we're gonna have to think about how we're gonna make this to keep the pig going up. But I and to Josh's point too, I think it's important, and we see it in the prosthetic realm as well, is you have to have a team. So you've got your veterinarians, the orthotists, and then somebody, if you're going to be 3D printing on the design side of things, because the last thing we need is doing a prosthetic socket for a pig that weighs 400 pounds out of PLA, and and it hurts the animal. So you need to, I think that's what Josh was alluding to, is that team is super important, and knowing that you're going to finish out the care too, because leaving somebody hanging, especially animals or humans, likewise, is not good for the long haul. So yeah, Josh, this was great. Thanks so much for sharing.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Brent. Thank you, Joris. Yeah. And to Brent's point there, I mean, it always is, it's always about a team, right? Whether that's our family at home or our work team. That's one of the reasons I really love working with the farm sanctuaries, because they tend to all have teams in place. So you get that kind of collaborative vibe and effort. And Joris, one of the things, I guess, just to add to your previous question, is what can help. I think one of the really cool things about what we're doing with 3D printing, specifically with animals and some of these larger types of animals, is that we get an opportunity to kind of work to the edges of some of the technology and see in the material sciences and things like that, which ultimately could have a really significant impact, working backwards into the care that we provide and the designs that we can provide for humans as well. So that to me is exciting too.
Okay, perfect. Hey, thanks a lot, Josh. Thank you so much. And thanks, Brent. And thank you guys for listening. I thought this was a really wonderful episode. I hope you do too. And have a great day.